my
Good
dear?
morning. I'm good. I'm good. How are you? I had to
I'm
check the time that it was still morning.
I'm great. Welcome to Body Story. Thank you for being here
Thanks.
today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Cool. Well, let's get started. If you can please share with us who you are, where you live, the work that you do, and why you said yes to sharing your body story today.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Anna, from a former life Susco, as you knew me, but now married for a year plus, a Togia. I live in Alexandria, so right outside of DC. And newly, actually, I just changed careers after about 6 years. I work for a dating app called Hinge. So I manage and head up the data privacy and security and compliance of our products there. And the reason I said yes, well, one, selfishly to see you and talk to you and catch up a little bit. It has been too long.
Yes, it
And
has.
two, I think like this is something that I think about a lot, like passively. And I think once it starts to like surface a little bit too much, then I'm a suppressor. So I think a little bit of this is like getting me out of my comfort zone to maybe talk about some of the things that I'm like, oh, maybe not today, or we'll save that for another time, or, I'm dealing with more important stuff. So I think this is a little bit of like a gentle nudge. For me personally to kind of ask myself and like answer some of these questions that I know are there, but haven't quite come all the way to surface.
Ooh, a gentle nudge. Well, this is Coach Coco nudging you.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's just jump right in, Anna.
Right.
Where do you want to start when you hear what is your body story? Where does your mind go to? What part of your life? Where do you want to start?
Yeah. So I don't know. I think for me it started early, right? So like I have and probably forever will identify as an athlete.
Mhm.
That started for me at a young age. I tried my hand in a bunch of different sports. The ones that my mom would let me do that I wouldn't get hurt in
Okay.
was always her take. And so it was things like dance and like a little bit of gymnastics and then like one year in the summer, they were like, well, why don't we try, swimming?
Mhm.
We had like a local pool and then like a local lake in the area, and I had a bunch of friends doing it. And that really kind of turned into my thing. I
Okay.
went from doing like a summer league to doing a more of like a competition team into high school. And then like really that's like that was my path into college, right? That's why I chose JMU. And that took up, those 4 years of my life primarily. Those are some of my best friends. We've gone through weddings together, then babies. So it's like that's always been my identity. And I think on the on like the coattails of that has also
Mhm.
been the body image piece. And I don't think that it was like I didn't have like I wouldn't call it like a negative or a positive experience, but it was always just there, right? Like swimming in general is a very sexualized sport, if you will, right? Like the clothing is minimal for both men and women.
Yeah.
Like you're wearing skin tight suits, like the smaller the better. Summers we wore bikinis, like I lifeguarded. So it's like it's hard not to associate your body image to that, especially when uh there's like a natural cause and effect, right? Like if I gained a little bit of weight or if I started to go through puberty, like that
Mhm.
affected me as like an athlete in that sport. And so
Mhm.
I don't know that I was ever like fully consumed by it, but I think that definitely started early and like carried out through and into my college years. And then I
Okay.
would say after is when it like really hit, right? Like after I had to stop really identifying as an athlete and kind of find my new normal, right? Like it wasn't 30 hours a week anymore that I was spending in the pool and in the weight room and like
Yeah.
thinking about like thinking about the sport as much as I did, it moved more into like, okay, now I'm a little bit more sedentary and now I'm working 40 hours a week and now I'm my metabolism is thinking it can like eat all of the same things, but like I'm
Mm.
not doing 20, 30 hours of working out to combat that. And so I
And
started to see a little.
And that, Anna, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is why
No,
I
no, no.
wanted, it was important for me to interview women who were former college athletes and who were like,
Yeah.
I had already experienced kind of this competitiveness in them and this kind of this eager, and I know that about you from working with you previously. I
Yeah.
know that you took being an athlete very seriously. So I'm deeply curious about what does this look like in this post-athlete world? Because you're still a very active woman, you're still very engaged in movement, but how do you now process your body story out of that being known and you identifying as a college high school athlete? What is that like for you in your body now?
It's definitely not the same, right? Like, and the way that I would describe it is that I am probably more it like in a natural state of my body than I
Ooh,
was then.
ooh,
And
tell me
it's
more. Tell
hard.
me that. Talk to me
Yeah,
about that.
it's hard not to be, right? Like again, it's not an exaggeration to say that we worked out 30 hours a week, right? And so I will never get back to that. And so a lot of the times people say like, in my 30s or my 20s, I was the fittest that I was ever going to be and like I want to get back to that. But for
Mhm.
me, I'm sort of like I don't know that there's a part of me to go back to
Mm,
without completely like going back into that lifestyle. And I'm sort of like post college, like maybe this is Anna, right? And like that this is the version of me that like, yes, still works out and like generally tries to eat healthy, but like looking back, I'm like, I don't know that I would want to try and like recreate that. And I
mm,
don't know if there's like a like safe and healthy version in my 30s to do
mm,
that. And I think that's probably like the place that I'm like struggling in and with now is like, what's the sustainable version of my body that I can be in, thinking about like, what I looked like, how I felt back then without having to replicate all of those same things to get there. And
mm.
that's tough, right? Because we don't have the luxury of like being students anymore and that being like my sole focus. Like I
Yeah.
have work, I have a family, I have I try and get to like workout classes in the gym, but like I'm lucky if that's 5, 6 times a week for an hour, right? It's not quite the same. And then like you bring in meals and like what I'm going to eat in a hurry and like the snacks that I'm going to grab and things like that, like things that I used to not think about. Now
Yeah.
I'm like a little bit more conscious in, and I'm like, man, where's the balance that I'm trying
Yeah.
to get to.
Are there things now, Anna, that you find with this because it is a struggle like when you were at this performance and now I'm hearing both that it's like the struggle but also almost like a piece like a realization of that's not realistic anymore based on just kind of the moving parts in your life right now. Do you ever have like is there how do I formulate this question? What I'm curious about is there something from your past body story that you might still be holding on to or that you find ruminating thoughts around that you wish were a part of your story now? Or are you just at this place of this is where I am now, let me just accept this and figure out how I'm going to manage this now?
So I think the best way or there's like a meme that stands out to me that I think about every now and then.
Okay.
Maybe you know it, but it's like I'm not going to do the actual like wording of it justice, but basically it's alluding to the fact that like I look at pictures and I wish I could look like I did when I thought that I was like fat, or like when I thought that I was like
Mm,
heavy, like me 5 years ago. And then at that point in time, like me 5 years before that. And so like,
mhm,
I don't want to take that all the way back to like the college days, but that sentiment is something
mm,
that I think about all the time, where I'm like, me at this point in time, I'm like, man, 5 years ago, I thought that I had like gained, the mid 20s, like working young woman weight. And then 5 years
mhm,
before that, I thought I gained the like post college weight. Well, now 10 years later,
mm,
I'm like, I would give anything to go back to either of those
yeah,
milestones.
yeah,
So I think to take that back to your question, it's like when I think about it that way, then there must have been a part of me back then where I was thinking about it too,
mm,
but not so much so that like festers in me to this day,
mm,
right? Like I don't think back and I'm like, oh, did I have some sense of like body dysmorphia or like problems with my body? Not to that degree, but I
okay.
definitely think like it has been, when I look at it over time, it has been an evolution and like a change, and like maybe not necessarily in the direction that I want to be going in. Like at some
Mm,
point, I think I want to, you know, bring it back. And everyone talks about like the quarantine weight and stuff, but not so like drastically that I'm like, oh, I want to look like I did when I was like a little string bean my senior year of college,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Culturally, Anna, like when you think of your family and even culturally, what is there like when it comes to the body story or kind of an ideal for how a woman, should present herself? Is that something that you heard growing up, or is that like been a topic of conversation on like the ideal body size or body type culturally for your family?
Yeah, so that's a fair question. I mean, I've always come from a family of chubby cheeks. That's something that we will always have and kind of love about ourselves. But I definitely grew up with, my mom being someone who, she didn't force like the weight conversations, and she wasn't overbearing, but there was never a time that I don't remember where she wasn't like trying like a fad diet, or like always trying to lose a couple of pounds, right? Like that was always the thing. It was like a couple of pounds in like the belly area. And so that has like stuck with me throughout my, like as early as I can remember, and like through now,
Okay.
that my mom was like never quite at where she wanted to be, or it was like one step forward and two steps back. And there were always like moments where she'd be like, oh, did you gain a little weight? Or, oh, you look really good. So like there were there was an attributing to like the physical features of your body and my family, but like I wouldn't call it, like I said, I wouldn't call it overbearing,
Yeah.
but enough that I like remember it, right?
How do you feel when people, because I was chatting with another woman and she was sharing kind of how she interprets when somebody tells her she looks great. How do you feel when you receive compliments? Either, a critique, somebody close to you is kind of pointing out something they noticed, or they're telling you you look really great, Anna. How do you receive that when it comes to your body story?
Uh that's an interesting question. It depends. Like I think it's situational. And I
Okay.
think where that stems from is if I feel good first, right? Like if we're going out to dinner and like I've got a great outfit on and I know we're going to take pictures and we're going out with family and friends, and then compliments compliment that, right? For a lack of better words,
Okay.
or like validate that is I guess what I'm trying to say, then I really enjoy it, right? Like it is like validation, and I'm like, yes, I felt great too. Let's roll with it. But I think in the moments where I like don't feel great, and or it's like not something that I'm thinking about, like like words of affirmation aren't really my thing. So I get uncomfortable. Even if it's just like being and we're at home and I'm like, I haven't showered and I have my hair up and I'm in sweats, I'm sitting on the couch and he's like, oh, you look really good. I'm like, ugh, like
Why?
go
Why is
away.
that your response, do you think, Anna? Why do you dismiss? What do you think that is?
I don't know. I think a part of me is like, I need to believe it for myself first.
Okay.
And I think like I'm probably like many people, my own biggest critic.
Mhm.
So I think it's like that's sort of the foundation, right? Is like let me assess where I'm at this point in time, and then any feedback from there, like I'm willing to take. But if it's
Mhm.
like off the cuff and like spur of the moment, then I think even if it is a compliment or even if it's like a judgment, like I don't think I one harp too heavily on it, but two, I also can't say that it like makes me like it elates me or like makes me feel
Mhm.
great or like makes me feel better than I was like in that moment because I hadn't like vetted it. Is maybe the best way to put that.
How do you mentioned the word assessment. How do you personally assess and check in with how you're feeling about your body? And when I say body, I'm hoping that this is encompassing everything from like crown
Yeah.
all the way to our toes, like everything you're feeling. How do you check in and assess with where you are with receiving and welcoming these compliments as truth? Like, what's your self assessment look like? How do you check in with yourself?
Uh that's that's probably the toughest thing that I think I deal with because I think that there are so many variables that are that are different from each other. And so I'll give you like a couple of examples, I guess. It's like
Okay.
sometimes like I can jump on the scale and it's like not the number that I want to see. And like after like a long weekend, right? Like we went to a music festival this past weekend and like drank a lot, ate a lot, whatever. And like I'll jump on the scale or like I'll head back into the gym and just kind of see where I am like
Okay.
numerically, and I'm like, oh, like, not great. But then I'll like look back at those pictures and I'm like, wow, we look great. Like, we're like happy and vibrant and I love my outfit and I'm with friends and we're laughing. And so it's that. And
Okay.
then like insert any other two scenarios, right? I'll look at our mirror behind me in the house and I'll like put on an outfit and I'm like, man,
Okay.
I love this. Like I
Yeah.
I look great. Like this is my like trusted and true like assessment. And
Okay.
then I'll get to a store and like be trying something on and I'm like, oh my God, like I did not look like that this morning, right? And
Oh
so it's like
gosh, Anna, that is
it's
so
hard.
true. Wow.
It's hard because you're like, well, what's the reality then, right?
Mm,
Because like it, what blows my mind is that like you will never actually like experience the you that other people do, right? Like
mm.
I can never physically look at myself in real time, right? Like as the person that I am. So
Yeah.
it's like I am bound to these other things that I have to rely on, whether it's like people's opinions, a mirror, a scale, another mirror somewhere else. And when there is like huge disparities between those things, you're like, well,
Mm,
then what is the truth like that I'm trying to seek and that I'm looking
mm.
for? Because there's like nuances to all of these things.
Anna, what a good point because even in all the like I really resonated with like you'll check in with yourself in the morning in the mirror and then you'll go like to a mall and try something on. You're like this doesn't feel right. This doesn't look right. But that
Yeah.
reality of but then somebody else can see you and think you look like $1 million. So that I really love that point because it that inner assessment, even if it's not the best day, maybe it's just like this just doesn't look the best on me right now. Maybe I'm just in a funk and it's not looking the best because of where I'm at right now. So just kind of that
Yeah.
I'm always curious how people give themselves that grace and compassion and understanding the like variations of how we are as human. We're not always going to love the way we look every single time, even if we're trying to pump ourselves up. So I just that's a really refreshing way to look at it. How because I can think of girl when I've had the worst hair day. And people are like, your hair looks great today. I'm like, what the heck are y'all looking at? So it's such a
But
good
then you're also
point.
like, what am I looking at, right? Because
Yes.
like in one version of me, like a picture or like a mirror, I'm like, and like they do like depending on like size and dimensions, like there is a sense of like warping, but I'm like, man, like if and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, like if I can do that assessment of myself first, where I'm like, I walk out the door and I feel great and I'm just like validated by what other people say, then like, yeah, those are the moments that like hype me up. But then I know that there are all these other factors where I'm like, yeah, I
Mhm.
walk into like a Target or a TJ Maxx and I'm like, do you guys just do this on purpose? Like, like what's the like marketing like game here? Because I like 20 minutes later and I have like
Oh,
way more cellulite than I did before,
oh,
like all these different angles, like the
mhm.
lighting in there is bad. So I'm like, you know,
Wow.
do I take what people say at face value? Because like that's exactly what it is, right? Like that
Mhm.
they are seeing the purest form of you that is like not a picture, not a reflection, not a number
But
on
then,
a
but it's
scale.
also, Anna, their lens too. I heard a quote years ago,
Yeah.
beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So however
Yeah.
they see, it's really everybody's putting on their own individual glasses. And I think when I started to look at it like that, like when I look at couples out in the world or people that are matched up, I'm like, I wonder what it was that they saw in each other.
Totally.
What was that attraction, the connection? And it just gets me curious. They saw and felt something different. And I think when I started to shift my mindset on what are people experiencing when they're in my company, the full essence, what's the fullness of me, what's the full physical body, but also the inner that they're experiencing, what's the feeling? It really did shift a lot in how I move in the world with my own personal body story. It's been pretty incredible to think about it like that, how everybody's looking at us with their lens and their life experiences.
Yeah. It's like that
Wow.
same concept where you like hear your own voice and you're like, oh, I'm too close to it right now to know what I really sound like. And then you hear a playback and you're like, what?
Yeah.
That's me.
Oh man, Anna. So what are you right now like? What's working for you really well on those days when you're just maybe not feeling your. Oh, I wanted to ask you this. I'm sorry I forgot this. Do you hop on the scale often? I'm always curious about people's relationship with checking their weight. What does that look like for you?
No. And it's
Okay.
also because like I weigh something different in like different parts of our house. So like again, like it all goes back to like we've got like a tiled floor in our bathroom and
Okay.
like the tiles are like slightly uneven. So I'm like, if you hit a corner the wrong way or the right way, then I'm like, that's like a, 3 to 5 pound differential. And like same thing when I move it over to like our like fake hardwoods, whatever they are, like parquet floors. And there's like the little bit of like bubbling in there. I'm like, this isn't what I actually weigh. So like, what am I even doing?
And you know what's funny,
So
Anna? When my weight loss journey started, I feel like the scale was a really important like accountability. I don't own a scale. I don't hop on one unless I go to the doctor now, just because
yeah,
I felt like that was a for some people it's accountability and they can really feel like it holds them to whatever goal they have, but it's a very personal thing with the weight. I found like it was more toxic in my life. And now when I see it, even if it's gone up, if I see the weight go up, I'm like, what's different in my life? What's been going on differently? So that there's like a justification. It makes sense to me.
yeah,
And I think when I started to, instead of like, gosh, you've been eating or you haven't been working out enough, like all the shaming, it's
yeah,
what's been new in my life, what's been different that's maybe adding to this 5 to 7 pounds. So just the
yeah.
thinking of that has helped a lot.
Yeah, it's so funny that you bring up the doctor piece too, because I think that's like probably where I had my like revelation of being like, "Oh, I'm not jumping on the scale anymore," because I distinctly remember one time that I went to my gynecologist
Yeah.
and I had been like working out and like eating healthy. And for that appointment, I ended up putting on like a pair of jeans that like were fitting a little snug for a while. And I like put them on that morning and I like felt great, right? Like a non-scale victory. Um,
Yes. Love
that's
those.
kind of
Those are the
the buzz
best.
phrase these days. Yeah. And I was like, I feel great. And then I get to the I get to the doctor, and you know how they weigh you with like everything on? They're like, oh, you could keep your jacket, your purse, your jeans,
Boots,
your shoes
your
on.
purse.
And I'm like, oh, the 30 extra like layers and pounds that I have on right now. And I like it like clicked for a moment where I was like, well, what do you care? Right? Because
Mm,
10 minutes ago, you were like, you put on this outfit, you felt great. And now you're like, oh, for the scale victory side of things, you want to shed all these layers off just so like the number correlates. And then I don't
mm,
think that they do, you know, or should. So to answer your like earlier question, I'll jump on every now and then because we have it and I'm like curious, but like for the same reasons that you do, where I'm like, oh, it's been a long weekend. Um, and I'm like trying to jump back into things like, let me at least give myself some sort of like baseline, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. Even right
So
now, it's funny. I was shopping. My sister and I went to the mall this week, and we were just, all the clothes just seemed like 90s. Everything felt like, seemed snug and tight. We just sounded like old ladies, like, oh, everything's so tight and short. And it was so funny. But, anyways, I remember, thinking, like, I remember telling her, like, yeah, we're getting to the colder seasons, and I know me, I cook differently. I always know I gain a few pounds around this season, and before it used to be something that I would shame myself for. Now it's almost like, it's gonna sound strange, but I almost welcome it. It's like, okay, it's the holidays, I'm gonna gain these few pounds, everything's gonna be okay, because I know the discipline on what it looks like to get back on track. So it's like I almost give myself this little leeway. But then I'm
yeah,
less asking myself the question on, why does it have to be this little permission to gain this weight? Where does that come from, Coco? So then
yeah,
I'm left asking myself that question. So it's just an ongoing conversation. And as long for me, Anna, as it comes back to how am I feeling, like these are joyous moments, cooking, eating good, warm, cozy food that's sticking to your
yeah,
bones, the memories that come with it. And then just kind of
yeah,
the getting back on track, like just the balance of that. I think when I bring it back to that, I'm okay. I find myself in a good space.
yeah. Yeah, for me, it was like, it was similarly, it was like making like a switch from, so like I think we talked a little bit about this, but prior to the actual interview starting, like quarantine was really stressful for us. Like
Yes.
we were the like first pack of people trying to like plan a wedding in like
Mm,
March 2020 when we had no idea what was in store and what it was going to look like, and all of that stress was compounding. And I was sort of like, well, we don't even know what's going to happen like tomorrow or next week. Like I'm not also going to be thinking about like so much what I'm eating and like what I'm doing. Like it was just a stressful time. And so I think like a lot of people, like we found comfort in just like, what are things that we don't have to think about, right? Like ordering in a lot more than we did. And
yeah.
like I was just like tired from like planning, like wasn't working out as much. And so definitely like gained weight over the course of the last year. And I noticed that I started to do this thing that like I used to do a lot too, where it was like I would set milestones, right? Like
Okay.
by this time, X would happen, or like by this time, I'll lose this amount of weight, you know, by the end of the year, or by our wedding, or by the time I'm 30. And I would just be like defeated when it didn't
Mm,
happen. And more often than not, it like didn't. And this was like pre-pandemic too, but I've realized, I think, in even just like the last couple of like weeks and months, that I've found like a workout that I really like doing, right? Like I found
okay.
classes that I really like going to and going back to. And it's not because I'm trying to like reach this milestone, but because like I'm going with friends and neighbors and like having a good time and like building a community around it, like really kind of how I felt in college and like being an athlete again, not to the same like extremities, but just like doing it because I enjoy it and not because like it's checking a box for something, right? Or like some sort of milestone that I'm trying to meet. And like we're slowly getting there with like our nutrition and our diet again too, where we're like, okay, let's pare back on like the Uber Eats and like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And like let's cook more at home. Like now that we're getting back into a routine and like this new normal. And I think while I can't say that it's had like like I've seen instrumental changes. I'm also not tracking them, which might be a benefit
Mm,
in and of itself, where I'm like, I'm just enjoying this, I'm doing it, I can
yeah.
sustain this for a lot longer,
Yep.
and I'm like genuinely happy. And I hope that like with that happiness ends up coming some sort of, again, like non-scale victories that I want to see. But if they don't, I'm
Mm.
happy, I'm
Oh,
happy
I
doing what
love
I'm doing,
that.
and I'm not like stressing about it.
A two-syllable word that when it comes to like how we feel in our body and the choices we do to kind of make it feel happy, it's just such a simple word, but oh, what a nice spot to be in. Do you think, Anna,
Yeah.
about like getting older? Do you think about yourself and kind of maintaining this mindset around your body and the evolution of it in your 50s and 60s, like as you get older? Have you thought about that?
Uh yes, I think that that's a culmination of more than just like the body story. Like things are falling into place for us that we're like really happy and excited and proud of. I think like where we are in our careers and where we are with our relationships with our families and our close friends, and just like the way that we're like living our lives, and hopefully like we'll continue to post pandemic and start like traveling again. I think that's what we want to carry into like each and every decade. Like I would say like we are finally at a place where we're like we feel good about our like finances, like we're in the middle of like looking for a like new and bigger home, and it's just like things are falling into place that I think will be inclusive of just also our like physical and mental and emotional beings as well, just like will naturally again like coattail with where we are in our lives right now, I think into our 40s and our 50s. So I think we're on an upward trajectory and have like a little bit of momentum of excitement behind where we're at right now, that I think if we stay the course and like could just continue to again be like happy and excited and experience things, um will just naturally kind of come with us into the
What a
40s and the
blessing.
50s. Don't wish my 30s away. Like I
Ah,
just like I'm a fresh
you're
30
fresh, girl.
something. So I'm ready
Oh,
for this to be my best decade, and then I'll
yes.
say the same thing about years to come.
Oh, that's exciting. What do you love and appreciate most about your body, Anna? What do you love when you look at it? You're just like, wow, I really love this part of my body. You appreciate it.
uh well, Bing would probably disagree with me on this. But I think like just being able to be like naturally gifted to like move and be strong and like put it through. For me it's physical, right? Like I at the end of the day I will always love like working out and trying new things, and like
Mm,
a time ago it was like yoga for me, and then it was like a little bit of rock climbing, and then we've gotten into like cycling, and like I still continue to swim, and we've thought about doing like longer distance like triathlons and stuff. And so like being able to like put it through these physical
mm.
feats, and I joke a little bit about Bing because he definitely considers himself more of the athlete when it comes to contact sports, but just like more of like the me against myself is
Mm,
probably the thing that I appreciate most, is like if I'm good to it and like and like putting into my body what it needs and like what it deserves, then I've always been really proud of the output.
mm,
And just like trying new things and like being able to like hike and backpack and do some of the like be outside and just like experience like the world on foot and on bike and
mm,
on ropes and like whatever it may be, and that my body is able to do that without any sort of real difficulty,
mm.
um means more to me than maybe like any one physical trait that I might
Oh,
have.
I mean, it really is a blessing, just that this machine that we get to live in and make stronger. It is incredibly powerful. Oh,
Yeah,
you see why
she
I'm
does a good
obsessed with talking about this.
job.
Anna, what would you, as we kind of wrap up, because, women of all ages will watch this, teen girls will watch this, women in college, college athletes. What do you want to leave them with? What would you like to what would you like to share with them as they're processing and thinking about their personal body stories?
I think experience each part of your life for what it is, right? Like we talk a lot about like living in the moment, and I think it is important to like reflect and look back and also have like aspirations for the future, but like don't forget to live in the moment that you're in,
Mm,
because until it's gone, if, at least for me, I tend to not think about it. And like, even in these conversations, you've heard me allude to like, oh, back in the day, I did this, or I thought about this. And I'm like, did I really like stop and think about that in the moment that I was in? Right. Like, did I
mm,
stop and think about like why my body is the way that it is right now
mm,
versus saying, oh, my body is the way that it is right now. I wish it was the way that it looked 10 years ago. And I think just like being able to like sit with where you at and like where you're at and like the situation that you're in and the body that you have in this moment in time, and just enjoying it in its entirety and like doing right by yourself and by your body and doing the things that make you happy and are healthy, and are fueling your body, like whatever that means for any individual. Like think about it in this space, in the space that you're in, because that changes right over time and naturally your environment, what you're doing, the line of work that you go into. So there's going to be all these other factors that like you can't control. So at least taking the time to like sit in the things that you can control and like relish in those, and
mm.
don't let them pass by so fast. I think that's one of the things that I wish that I maybe took more advantage of, is enjoying every stage of my body, for what it was, because I didn't know what was to come, and I still don't, right? Like I could be in the best shape of my life in my 40s,
Yeah.
but that's another me, and that's for other reasons than the body that I'm in right now, and why.
Oh, wow. Anna, such wisdom. And we see our conversation just goes all over the place,
I
but
know.
thank you so much for sharing your perspective and just kind of what your body story has meant for you through the years. And I'm guaranteed that there's somebody watching or listening to this is gonna take something that's gonna stick with them. So thank you so much for your time today.
I'm gonna go back and listen to it. I'll be like, what did I say to myself? Because I really should take my own advice.
Oh,
No, thank
Anna,
you. This is awesome.
it
Um,
really was. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your body story today.
Thanks. Thank you.